welcome to the Filmanthropist, the show that details the struggles and intricacies of filmmaking. I'm your host SK, and today we are going to talk about writing episodic series with Fuad Halwani. Fuad is a Lebanese filmmaker and screenwriter who's written shows that have aired across the MENA region. Hi Fuad, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi, SK. Thanks for having me. Glad to be part of this. It's a really nice idea that you're doing.
Cheers, man. So just give us your a brief intro about yourself and your work.
Okay, so as you said, I'm a Lebanese filmmaker and scriptwriter. I've done my master's with you in a program called Kino Eyes, which is an Erasmus program where I specialized in script writing. Before that, I did my BA in a university here called Lebanese American University, but it was more of a general type of BA where we studied everything from film to TV to theater even. But I only started specializing in this thing around 5 years ago when I started working with also another Lebanese writer called Bassem Bresh. He's known here and in the region for one of the first web series that came out, which is called Shankabut. It was produced by BBC. So I kind of started as a co-writer, staff writer, being in the writer's room, understanding what this is all about, the writer's room, until eventually in 2018, I got the chance to write a mini-series called Rabih TV, which is basically the story of a Lebanese serial killer in the making. And it's kind of like a dark comedy about that. So, and since then, I've been taking part in a lot of like workshops, writers' rooms and stuff, mainly in serial TV, like serial fictions. But I've also like recently written a short film. And yeah, basically, I like to say that I'm a script writer, but I'd like to start expanding into other forms of writing, like not only script writing.
I mean, the thing with the episodic series, right now, it has become very much the go-to medium for pretty much most audiences who like consuming fictional content. Yeah. And it has also gotten a reputation of a writer's medium, where writers can kind of explore their characters in much more depth and detail than usually they can in film. Not only that there's also kind of given an opportunity, since it's a writer's medium, it kind of also acts as an actor's medium because they are the one who eventually play out these characters. And many actors have gone on to like achieve great heights. People who are not household names have become household names because of episodic series and stuff. So just detail us about how exactly is this a writer's medium, in the sense of course, you get to elaborate on characters as you've spoken, but from a writer's perspective, how does it look like when you're starting out?
Okay. This is a this is a nice question because it is indeed a writer's medium. I would say mainly it's because the story kind of rules in series more than anything else, more than the directing, if you want, because this is the endless struggle, I think, in cinema and all visual arts between the director and the writer, whose thing is it? So feature films mainly are seen as the director's medium since it's the director's signature that's on it. You can know a feature film by the style of a director or something like that. Whereas in series, the story rules, as I said. So the writer is king. So the writer really needs to be aware of every single detail that goes on through the whole series for it to hold, for it to make sense. Because you can't, of course, when we talk about these things, there's always different models of how things are done. So if we're talking about it, mainly we're talking about the American model because they are dominant in the media and TV series scene. So in the States, mainly most series usually have different directors per episode, especially the big ones, which kind of tells you that the director's role is mainly in executing the show more than giving an artistic look. And there's also another role in TV series, which is something that is slowly emerging. Like the Americans have made something of it, but let's say in our region, it's still something that's still being explored, which is the role of the showrunner, who is usually the creator or executive producer of a certain show. So let's take Breaking Bad, for example. Vince Gilligan, he was the creator of the show, the main writer of the show, the showrunner, and the executive producer, which can all be seen as one, So it's mainly the showrunner's vision that gets transmitted onto the screen. And the directors who work on each episode have to have a unified vision in order to execute it in a consistent way, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
that you don't feel that each episode has a different feeling or a different vibe or a different direction, basically. So the showrunner usually makes sure that all these visual aspects, if you want, apart from the writing, is
Mm-hmm.
kind of kept in check. And most of the times, the showrunners are the writers of the show, are like the head writer. But
Mm-hmm.
as you know, also, there are like in the American model, sometimes you have 10 writers per show, sometimes even more. So it's like a big group of people who are working to write the thing, but there always has to be someone who's kind of overlooking or overseeing the whole process. So yeah, from this sense mainly, I think that's why the writer is more prominent in series than in other
Yeah.
mediums.
Vince Gilligan is a great example also because I've
Yeah,
heard an interview of him not recently but a few years
yeah,
ago, and he said something like, I basically what I've written was a show about an older man who literally is a nobody, and he's a chemistry
yeah,
teacher and suddenly wants to start selling meth. This
yeah.
is like, if you
Amazing
go into
pitch.
any room and just pitch this, it actually sounds stupid, is what he said. Who's going to give
Yeah,
money to this guy? At the end of
yeah,
the day, someone somewhere trusted him, and he ended up making the series, and it ended up being one of the pioneers of this kind of
definitely.
format. I mean, you talk about episodic series with anyone, the definite name that comes up is Breaking Bad.
Yeah, yeah. And in every writer's room I take part of, we're always trying to make a show like Breaking Bad,
Exactly.
as good
Yeah.
as Breaking Bad, because it's, yeah, as you said, it's just so good.
But on the topic of Breaking Bad,
Mm,
since I've seen it as well, but not when it came out, but much later, and I kind of watched it in a week,
mm.
all 5 seasons of it.
Oh, wow.
It
Okay.
kind of gave me a feeling that no matter how good it is very good. And obviously, the way I saw it is not how it's meant to be watched or whatever. But still, I binged it, and when I binged it
Mm,
after season two or around the beginning of season three, it became extremely predictable. When you're in the world, you're not in the real world, and you're in the world of Breaking Bad. There's
yeah,
things that kind of the escalations,
yeah.
how they solve, how they complicate the plot even further. These are tricks at the end of the day. These are
Mm,
from a writer's perspective tricks.
definitely.
And when you're constantly exposed to these kind of tricks, at some point you kind of become, yeah, you see it,
Definitely.
you see through the
Yeah,
trick. And
definitely.
which is all right, because again, it wasn't meant to be watched like that. When you watched it over the period of 5 seasons, obviously this isn't the case.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
still constantly trying to second guess the writer, which is great. But it also gave me a feeling of there's these certain scenes or certain characters which, according to me, have no purpose.
Okay.
It's just to kind of like fill screen time.
Fillers. Yeah,
Yeah, fillers,
yeah,
and meaningless fillers rather. You could do without those, I don't know, 2 or 3 to 5 minutes per episode.
yeah,
It's just it doesn't actively affect the plot. It doesn't actively do anything to give more insight about the main characters. But these are
yeah.
just those tiny things that kind of exist, which made me think at some point that, okay, these episodic series somehow have this nature of TV serials, like the soap operas kind of.
Mm,
uh,
mm.
since the medium is also
Yeah, yeah,
similar,
yeah.
it's about binging, it's about constant, you need to keep the viewer active, you need to keep him
Being
second
hooked.
guessing, yeah, being hooked. So you kind of play these tricks, which is what differentiates it with cinema.
Mm,
So when you're watching a feature film, I mean, any good one doesn't usually have these redundant scenes.
yeah.
So what do you think about this, man? Like, what do you think that, these fillers, what do they do according to you?
This is very interesting. The fact that you mentioned this specifically because we were in a conversation about fillers. I think. Look, here's the thing. As far as I'm seeing, the more current shows, the newer shows, have less fillers than
Mhm.
a show like Breaking Bad. Okay, like yesterday, I've been trying to watch Stranger Things season 3 for the past year, and it's not working. But it is so filled with action and suspense that you somehow you get tired of how every scene something is happening. So this kind of made me think about this filler things is that the more contemporary series, I think, because there's no more any restriction. Hello, okay, just to give context, when Breaking Bad came out, it was, as you said, it was a landmark in TV history because it was one of the first times that they explore many different things, both formally and in terms of story and character and plot and all of these things. So if you watch Breaking Bad today, you get the sense that this is something that looks unlike anything that happened before it or after it, in a sense that it still abided by certain network regulations and formats, but it had many it had many aspects to it that made it look new and fresh. Firstly is formally, like the way it looked. It was one of the first cinematic series, network series that came out, so they gave more attention to camera, lighting, color. They actually worked a lot to. There's one image that I saw once. It shows you just the color scheme from season 1 to season 5, and you see how it progressively gets darker from 1 to 5. You know, so they put a lot of effort in that. Also, there's these gimmicks that they use throughout the whole series when they rig like the camera on something like a gun or a barrel, or so they had these stylistic things that made it look like it's not really following the format of what network TV used to be. That's one. But the second thing I think has to do with the fillers, you know, because one of the things of network television when TV was aired or broadcasted, you had to fill a specific slot. And you had to keep in mind when the commercials are going to come in, you know, the ads. So you had to break down your episode according to that. So if you look at any breakdown of Breaking Bad, it's like it follows a very rigorous 4 or 5 act structure. I think it's a 4 act structure. So it's a teaser in the beginning and then 4 acts, you know, something like that. So because of this, and I think because they had to fill certain episodes per season, you would find that Breaking Bad is a show that has a lot of these fillers, you know. There's a lot of dead time where, as you said, no characters are progressing, nothing is really happening. So I think this is just what was, yani, it was one of the residues of the older way of writing series that was still in that. When we talk about more contemporary shows, I find that these are becoming less and less frequent, although the need for fillers always arises. So in that sense, fillers sometimes can act as kind of like a breather, so it's not like too intense and stuff. But it depends, really, I think it depends on how you formulate what your series is from the beginning, like the whole project and how you see it. Like the binging thing, as you know, it's Netflix that introduced it to the TV world. Whereas I think HBO still till now, they release an episode per week or something like that. And as you said, when Breaking Bad came out, it was also like an episode per week, and you have to wait for a year from season to season. So when you watch them all together, you're kind of just waiting for the it all depends also on how you watch the thing, you know. It's
like your own expectation when you're watching it, and you know what kind of
exactly. Well, I just want to say one more thing about Breaking Bad, because there's something in this show that I think it works brilliantly, but it might also create this effect that you were talking about, is that from when at least that was the case for me. When I started watching Breaking Bad, I started watching it because I wanted to see how a chemistry professor who's a loser and has nothing working out for him becomes the biggest. That's what hooked me to the show.
Absolutely,
you know? And it kind of reveals the ending for you. You know, so you know what's going to happen afterwards, but this is what they call the engine of a series. It's what keeps you going. Other shows, like for example Game of Thrones, the thing that was outstanding in what they did or remarkable and what made it such a success is that they killed the engine at the end of season 1. You know, you started watching it thinking or building up an expectation for one thing that's going to happen, and then they just cut its head off. No spoilers, you know. So they did, and that creates a kind of shock for you, and you're like, okay, now I want to watch to see what's going to happen. So it's a different trick altogether, you know. It just depends. So I think what was brilliant in what Gilligan did for Breaking Bad is that he, as you said, the pitch sounds ridiculous, but I think what made it work is because it was really hooked to that main character. It was a character story, you know. We want to see an evolution, and an evolution is going to take time. So let's go on the journey and see how this is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was quite a pretty good one at that, the
Oh yeah,
evolution.
definitely,
I mean,
definitely.
yeah.
I watched the Breaking Bad twice. Yeah, I watched it the first time, which was like 5 years ago or something, and then I watched it again last year in the summer.
Hmm.
It's yeah. I don't think I'd watch it a third time. That's a bit too much. But when
Yeah,
you look at the nuances, like the details and the character building, and how he starts slowly changing and becoming someone else, it's like it's plotted down to the last detail. It's a
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah,
Vince Gilligan is really, and I find him one of the most brilliant showrunners slash writers in the industry over there. He's not made a lot of things, which is good.
hmm.
I started watching Better Call Saul. I don't know if you've seen it,
Not yet, no.
but they say it's amazing and they say it competes with Breaking Bad. So, and yeah, it's just very well written. He's just a really good writer.
Yeah. I mean, from his perspective, man, he's, let's say, prior to production of Breaking Bad, at least he spent a year or so on the project, and then 5 seasons of Breaking Bad, and then he's still in the same universe with Better Call
Yeah,
Saul for 5 more
yeah,
years
yeah,
plus. He's been living this world and
yeah. That's
living
true.
this story for more than a decade now, and
Yeah,
it's kind of, isn't there a point that comes where he's like, okay, this is it, I've created something which millions love and millions cherish. It kind of set benchmarks and all, but can I go do something else?
yeah, yeah,
Enough of this shit. He can keep creating 40 other
yeah,
shows from this if he needs to, because
yeah, yeah.
like the
Definitely, he
the world
created
is
a
so clear.
universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Once the
yeah,
universe is
definitely,
so clear, then you can just kind of keep expanding every tiny detail. Some kid becomes
exactly.
older and now there's a whole show about him, and
Yeah, but yeah, that's another thing that's another thing for me, which relates to why the writer is kind of a king or a god in that
Hmm.
universe, because you are creating a universe, and it can keep expanding
Yeah,
endlessly.
yeah.
So even with shows, let's say, I don't know, like House of Cards, although that's a bad example because it expanded, but then it became ugly.
Hmm.
But it just can keep going forever.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't have to stop at some point. So when you reach that point and you have a whole universe under your, coming out of your mind, and you are the main thing of this. Actually, House of Cards is a good example, I think, because it was 6 seasons, House of Cards, but in the fourth season, the showrunner, Bo Williman, left. But they
Hmm.
continued with it because Spacey wanted to make more. And that's when I think it went downhill. You can
All right.
notice stylistically it changed. The storylines became much more like if, dramatic, much more. I mean, there was a nuance that existed in House of Cards with Bo Williman that kind of it wasn't there when he left.
Hmm.
But I don't think maybe not everyone can notice these nuances.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that's the other thing, right? When you kind of, when a show is a huge hit, the season one, or until
mm,
season two, whatever, they're actually, when you're starting the series itself, the creators or whoever, they kind of have an initial estimate of, okay, I think I have content for, let's say, 4 seasons.
yeah,
So season two is over, but then it's a much bigger hit than what they've expected
than
or
they expected.
anticipated, and
Yeah,
suddenly the studio or Netflix, whoever is the producer, in that sense, they kind of probably put more stress in terms of, okay, we can't end it at season 4 because we
mm,
have the
exactly.
potential to kind of drag it to, I don't know, season 8.
Yeah, yeah,
And that kind of, again, it changes the whole ball game, and it also kind of,
mm,
in a way, it messes with the writer's head as well, because he's probably
definitely.
thinking, okay, I can create this universe again, I can expand it within the thing,
Yeah,
but more often than not, in some shows, the quality clearly goes down when this starts happening, when the
yes,
initial plan is kind of changed at some point
definitely.
during the middle, and shows just go downhill. And so often I've heard so many people talk about so many shows saying the first 2 seasons, man, they're brilliant, and then it
Yeah,
kind of loses its way. Like, this is
definitely.
90% of the shows, everyone says it
Mm.
about any show.
Most of these shows, because Breaking Bad is also it's a specific example in this, because when Vince Gilligan started it, he knew how it was going to end.
Hmm.
But that's not the case in 90% of the shows that are being made. They started because they have a nice concept. Let's
Hmm.
try season 1 and see what happens.
Hmm.
If you watch Stranger Things, let's say,
Hmm.
I mean, the first season was amazing. It was killer. The concept was really good. It's like nostalgic. It has a lot of things that خلاص, just make you hooked to it. The characters are really nice. Then season 2 was like a copy paste of season 1. Like, really, I think if we do the exercise of plotting season 1 and the main plot points that happen and putting season 2, it's kind of like the same. They took the same skeleton and just
Yeah,
repeat,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Season 3 is a bit more enticing, let's say,
Mm.
but still, like, you can't, you feel like, at least that's what it is for me. I feel like it's an effort to watch it. Like, okay, as you said, because, we've also reached the time in history where we've seen so many things,
Yeah,
so many
yeah.
fictions that nothing is new.
Exactly. Yeah.
Each trick in the book is there. And so you watch it and you're like, okay, I know what's going to happen. And خلاص, just,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay, give me a nice scene or something. So I think, unfortunately, this is how I think the formula has become for a mass industry like Hollywood, where, okay, we have a nice concept, we have the money, let's just do it,
Yeah, yeah,
and then we'll see what happens,
yeah.
which is not the best way, I think, to go. It removes from the integrity of the story and the initial idea behind the story.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think this has also been another reason why, you could call, let's say, the death of the sitcoms, the
Mm,
Your Friends and all of these shows. I mean, in the
yeah,
90s, they were the biggest thing. Like, I don't
definitely.
think any person born in the 90s or in the 80s, living in an urban world has not watched an
As
episode of
Yeah,
Friends. Yeah, yeah. So,
definitely.
but now there's very few of these, there's no laugh track kind of sitcoms, which are still,
Hey, yeah.
which is a good thing according to me, because one, I look back at a friend of ours like Shiva. He used to binge a lot of Friends even now, like like a year or so
Okay.
ago.
There's
And
always these people, no, who
yeah,
keep
yeah,
watching
exactly.
Friends forever. It never ends.
I don't get it, right? Like there's this nostalgia factor about Friends, which I mean, it was a good show, and in that time, I think it was the best show, undoubtedly.
Yeah,
But people have this nostalgia factor where no matter what comes, Friends is their best show
it
ever,
doesn't
and
stop. Yeah,
yeah,
it doesn't
nothing
stop.
comes
It's crazy.
close. Yeah,
There's those types, the Friends type, and recently I met the Office types
all
who do
right,
the same thing but with the Office.
much better, man. I still take
Much
that.
better. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's more understandable. But Anna, personally, I was always on the Seinfeld end
all
of the
right.
spectrum,
Yeah, okay.
not Friends. Friends, I liked it, but no, خلاص.
Yeah, yeah,
But Seinfeld, I can watch an episode anytime.
yeah, yeah.
Like, really.
I mean, I went a bit further there from Seinfeld. I went to Sunny in Philadelphia, which is, let's
Ah,
say
okay, yeah, that's also a good
the
one.
abusive Seinfeld.
Also, Sunny, like, it's not really a sitcom, right?
It's
It
not. It's
has a
not. Yeah,
few. Yeah, it's not like a typical studio
yeah, yeah. It's
sitcom.
not a laugh track
Uh,
kind of sitcom. Yeah,
yeah,
which is
definitely.
great because when I was saying when I was rewatching Friends with Shiva, I could see that half of the jokes won't work without the laugh track. You just
Oh,
remove the
yeah.
laugh track, they're bad jokes, or
Yeah,
at
they're just
least
bad
they don't
jokes.
work anymore. Maybe they only have that one time joke factor, where second time you
True.
say it, it's not funny anymore.
Yeah,
But things
definitely.
like Sunny in Philadelphia, for example, the quality of the jokes is much better. I think the humor is great because it's so
Yeah.
situational and it's not to do with just one expression or whatever. It has a lot of
Mm,
subtext. Friends
yeah,
in that
that's
sense is
true.
not such a deep kind of humor. It's very, I mean, I think it worked more on the friend factor and uh,
Yeah, and the
the most
dramas.
relatable drama shit. Actually, it's
Yeah,
more of a
yeah,
drama than a proper
yeah,
out and out comedy show.
yeah. But that's a good point what you just said now, because you feel like sitcoms are called sitcoms because it's like a situational comedy,
Hmm.
but they rely very heavily on the punchline type jokes,
Hmm.
where they just say something because it's funny without the situation. Whereas more contemporary comedies are more situational than the sitcoms ever were.
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah,
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 yeah. It's also part of the format thing, yeah. I think they used to rely more on these snappy jokes, like ha ha ha, but yeah, they're not funny anymore.
yeah. I mean, man, like Friends did it, Seinfeld did it, and there was
Yeah.
this other show called Everybody Loves Raymond. I don't know if you remember,
Yes, I
which was
used
a
to
pretty
watch
good
it. Yeah,
show. Yeah,
yeah, it was a
but
good show.
yeah, those were much better than Friends, and they never got the kind
Hey,
of PR or the kind of
true,
publicity that kind of Friends
true,
got,
true,
and
true.
they don't last. Like I've met so many people who haven't even heard the name Everybody Loves Raymond, for
Yeah. It
example.
was a very low profile show, but it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
funny.
exactly.
I remember the older brother was funny. You
Yeah,
remember the older
yeah,
brother? He
yeah,
was
yeah, I
like
do.
very tall, and
Yeah, yeah,
Ray Romano also. Allah, Ray Romano. you've seen, you've heard of BoJack Horseman, of
Yeah, yeah,
course.
yeah.
It's all about that, this show. It's amazing. It's all about, like, BoJack was an ex, like, he was a sitcom actor in the 90s,
All right.
and he was like, whoa, amazing, very famous and stuff. And now he's like, he's famous still, but he's a drunk, and like, he's depressed all the time. He's just living in the golden age, which reminded me of Ray Romano, because I think he's the same situation. He disappeared after that show.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's gotten back to stand up or something like that, but I don't think
Mm-hmm.
it worked out
Yeah,
for him.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's funny.
But coming
So
back to
yeah.
these writing process
Mm.
of episodic series and all of that, so
Yeah.
everything kind of when, let's say, I'm planning to write an episodic series, I kind of
Mm.
Google, obviously, first thing, what are the materials that I need to prepare, or and everyone, the
Yeah.
first thing that comes up is a story bible. you know
Yes.
what is the world of your series, who are the main characters of your series, and
Yeah.
what is the general progression of, let's say, season one, so, and the pilot, of course. So these are the main elements. So how do you map these things out, when you have an idea, you think it works well for an episodic series?
For me, I usually spend a long time just thinking about the concept of the show before I write anything.
Mm-hmm.
For me, all these materials are usually like, they're the production materials, what you need to submit so that
Mm-hmm.
someone else can understand what's going in your head. So when I come up with something, I usually spend a lot of time just thinking about it and making sure that it holds somehow, seeing some kind of visual references that make me kind of understand what the world is, and also thinking about the characters. For me, the characters are always like the vessels, and that's the thing also. Yeah, and to go back to the first question, characters hold the show more than the plot or the storyline on all of these things. So, but the Bible usually is the last thing that I write before submitting something for someone to read, because usually the way the industry does it in most parts of the world is that the Bible is usually the document that comes out after we understand what our show is, because then you put all your, the Bible basically has the, it should mainly have like character bios to know who your characters are and um, what their main arc is going to be, how they're gonna develop or change or whatever, what they're gonna do, and basically a breakdown of the season, each episode and what's gonna happen in it, the arc, the story
Yeah.
arc of each episode. Whereas the pitch document, usually, so far I've been working a lot with pitch documents more than Bibles, because I'm always at the stage where I'm trying to show something and see if someone is interested to make it. So
Mm-hmm.
a pitch document, there's no real consensus on what should be in a pitch document, but most of the times, I mean, you want to give someone an idea of what your show is about. So usually I like to put in a log line, because if you can tell your story in one sentence or two sentences, means you have, this is, it really works. I've been fighting this for a very long time, but then when I
Okay.
understood, it really works, because if you're able to just say what your concept is and the general story in two lines, means you have something that you understand, you
Mm-hmm.
know because sometimes when it's in your head, it's so clear and it's amazing, it's the best idea ever, but you, like, yeah, explain it,
Yeah.
and tell me what it's about. You find it very hard, because this happens and then this will happen, so you end up having to explain the whole story to understand, to explain to someone what the concept is.
Yeah.
Whereas a log line does all of this, because it kind of reduces everything into, really, what is the story about, what are we going to see, and what's going to hook us. So it's mainly the engine that you're talking about, what's
Mm-hmm.
driving your show. So a log line is very important. Synopsis, for me, doesn't really matter, because I always feel like the synopsis is going to be something after the show is done,
Mm-hmm.
because you needed to put it on an IMDb page or on the platform where you're showing the thing
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever. So instead of a synopsis, I think like a good page and a half to 2 pages story arc, where you
Mm-hmm.
just explain the whole season, what's going to happen, you
Mm-hmm.
know, from A to Z, including the main characters that we're going to see on screen. And these characters can also have a page where you explain in brief who is each character that you're seeing. So it's usually, for me, logline, character, story arc. And then a pitch document can include anything that you think helps someone visualize the thing. So themes, tone,
Mood boards and
um,
stuff.
yeah, exactly. You know, goals, what your intention is. I find the intention part to always be useful because you kind of get to explain why you want to do this, why you think it's relevant, why should people watch it now, why are
Mm-hmm.
you telling the story, you know, so it gives kind of a personal touch
Mm-hmm.
to your idea. And once all the, you know, usually you send this or you pitch it verbally. هلا, it's just I want to just talk about a bit about this because you know, from what I've experienced so far, so the Americans have a way of pitching, you know, they
Mm-hmm.
usually have this pitching thing where you stand in front of producers and you explain your story and stuff. And last year when I went to LA, I took part in like a script writing workshop in USC,
Mm-hmm.
okay, taught by people who work in the industry. And we had a lot of guests coming in, like showrunners telling us about their thing. They emphasize a lot on the pitch process. Like you need to know how to pitch. You need to know. So it's basically being a salesman to your story. That's
Yeah.
what they teach you. And we had a specific instructor who taught us how to pitch in 3 minutes, how to pitch in 5 minutes, and then how to pitch in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What usually happens there is that you get a good 30 minutes to explain your story, which means you have time and there might be a back and forth. In our part of the world, like I'm saying Middle East, MENA, because this is an industry that's now starting to flower, like
Mm-hmm.
slowly, slowly. We've had series, but they were done in a different way than what's happening now. We don't have the chance to pitch most of the times, you know, to sit and verbally, like there's no, this thing doesn't exist. So what we usually do is try to develop a document to be read that does not reveal too much, but reveals enough of your story, just to
All
give
right.
an idea. You know, I don't know why. I just felt like I like to talk about this because the pitching thing seems sometimes as if it's a very sacred process that you really need to know how to verbally explain your thing. But while I was there, the impression was that, damn man, they want you to become a salesman, you know, to reduce your story into something that can be marketed.
Yeah.
Many writers find this very difficult to do because, you know, the stereotype of
Yeah.
writers,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I understand this, so I don't need to explain anything to anyone. It's not a necessity. You know,
Yeah.
I've met brilliant writers from the Arab world who have never pitched anything in their life. It's the written work that proves if it's good or not.
Yeah.
So that's why I put like this emphasis on the pitch document, because there you can show your voice, there you can kind of sell it,
Mm-hmm.
but in a way that has to do not with you as a person and how good you speak, but in actually how good you write, you know, how
Yeah.
good your concept is, how good you are with words, even like how it flows and stuff. And the Bible comes later. And the Bible comes at a point when, okay, you've gotten a green light and you've worked out the episodes and what's going to happen. That's when you compile a Bible together and you you basically hand it in or something like that.
Starting March or something, I had this idea for an episodic series and I started
Okay.
writing. And I mean, whenever I write whatever, I kind of have this one, let's say, a struggle. It's not
Mm.
really a problem, it's a struggle where what happens is, uh, once I get the first idea or, the first thought, I start to think about it or, try to visualize in my head, join the dots, add the
Yeah.
beginning, middle, end, or, fill things up within that word. So I keep adding stuff, the idea keeps progressing, whatever, and I find myself at some sort of a block where, okay,
Okay.
I'm unable to come up with something more. And then when I look back at it, it kind of has completely changed from the first reason when I thought of it. I
Mm.
liked the
Okay.
story for a reason when I initially conceived it. And after
Okay.
working on it for a while, it has become a completely different thing. And I'm stuck at some
Yeah.
point. So I kind of have this
Yeah.
feeling of, one, this is not what I set out to do.
Mm.
So, where it is, it's all right. But, again, it's not what I set out to do. So I don't know if it's a correct, if I need to pursue this further or whatever. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
I get you.
started organizing things in a way where, every time I have this idea, I'm like, okay, this is the idea. This has to be it because this is what is exciting for me. So I try
Yeah.
to base the Bible here right away.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
once I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
the idea, I'm thinking, of course, log line first. I try to sum
Mm.
it up in 2 or 3 lines so that anyone asks me, I can just tell them, okay, so this is the
Yeah,
idea,
yeah,
this is the idea. And also the repetition of it in your mind kind of helps you, it kind of strengthens
definitely.
it in your mind. And after that, I straight up, get to the Bible. I mean, I'm not going to fill pages or whatever, but I just, try to kind of write a line each so that, again, let's not move away
Mm.
from this. This is the core of the whole thing. So,
Yep,
it's kind of so often that, when writers start, they kind of get lost in the process. That's for sure, no matter what you're writing, what format you're
definitely.
writing.
Yeah, that's normal. I think it should
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. So, but where is your end goal is kind of, that I think it differs from writers to writers. As some are more flexible with, moving around what they initially thought, and, or what excited
Definitely.
them. They want to find their way in terms of the story.
Yeah.
But, so everyone has their own style. But what do you make of this, like when you're kind of, again, when you have the idea and stuff? I'm not talking about,
Mm.
what kind of pitch materials or whatever, but I'm
Yeah.
more talking in terms of you have an idea, the initial, 1 or 2 lines of what you thought. So after that, where does your focus go? Does it go towards plot progression, or does it go towards
Mm.
character development?
Look, I would say because I'm discovering this thing about myself recently, I'm very structure oriented,
Mm-hmm.
So when I have an idea about something, that idea most of the times is about what's driving the story. So what are we gonna witness throughout the whole thing, and how is it gonna end?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what I usually do in the beginning. So I'm gonna give an example. So one of the ideas that I started like 3 years ago was basically set in Beirut in the 90s. So directly after the Civil War. The Civil War
Mm-hmm.
ended in 1990. And it's a group of teenagers in Beirut who get mixed up into satanic stuff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
look, it's very vague. It's still
Mm-hmm.
that vague till now. And what ends up happening is that they create some kind of cult like in the school. Okay, so that was the general thing that I had. That was the idea. That's what I was yani, that's what I was going with, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why that's what I used to get two other fellow writers on board and start like workshopping the idea in a writer's room.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it helps the most is to know how your story is gonna end and how are you gonna get to that. Hala, it's
Mm-hmm.
not enough, of course, but for me, it kind of gives you the mold, the structure, the thing. Some people are they're very afraid of structure because they're afraid that structure might make something formulaic. I don't think that's the case because even within the structure, you can create any kind of structure you want. It can be the structure where the first two episodes we're going like one certain plot line is happening and then it breaks and then it goes into something else for the next 3 episodes. So the structure can be very flexible. You can build it any way you want. And then
Mm-hmm.
everything that goes inside in terms of scenes, um, characters, but mainly scenes and plot points and what's happening, they all يعني serve to keep this general structure intact. At some
Mm-hmm.
point, definitely you might notice that, okay, there's something with the structure that's not working. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I need to fix it. And that comes like instantaneously when you start filling in the episodes and stuff. But just to get back to the question, for me, generally, it's always been about finding the main engine of the show, the main driving force, and the concept.
Mm-hmm.
And these two create a structure for me. So then I start thinking episodes. Okay, how many episodes do I want this to be? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. Most of the times, I'm not going to say it's a random number, but it's a number that usually has a significance that doesn't have to do with the story.
All right.
It's not like it depends, of course, because like the series I was working in Dubai, it was set out to be an 8 episode thing. And then during the process, we realized, okay, maybe 6 episodes would be better. And then we were like, okay, no, seven is perfect because we
All right.
understood that as we were writing the story. So we saw that 7 episodes are the best number to fit our story in. We don't need one more and we
Mm-hmm.
don't need one less. Whereas in this idea of the 90s kids, I was like, first I was thinking 9 episodes because 9 is a nice number and the cat has 9 lives and stuff like that, like something very stupid. And then we're like, okay, 9 is too much. A story is, 9 it would be pushing it to do 9 45-minute episodes. So we then reduced it to 7. 7 is also a magical number, like God created the world in 7 days. So I'm like, okay, 7 works, So it's maybe this is not the best way to do it. I'm still discovering this thing, but for me it helps
Yeah,
psychologically to
yeah,
avoid going into these blocks. It helps when I say, okay, this is a structure that is solid, golden. Let's try to fit everything into this structure. If it doesn't work, we can always change.
yeah.
Add an episode, reduce an episode, change the timing of the episode itself,
Mhm.
But it kind of helps me, because for me that links to a bigger idea, okay, which might, it might be, people might have a problem with this idea, but I think it helps
Mhm.
because it's important to understand what your limitations are in
Yeah,
order to write
yeah.
good fiction or good
Mhm.
material, because when it's like, okay, do whatever you want. I remember when I used to teach in school, sometimes I would give the kids, I used to teach teenagers, I used to give them, like, these days when I didn't feel like teaching, I'll tell them, okay, today we're gonna do small sketches. So break up into groups and you have like 30 minutes to create a scene, something
All
like
right.
that. I just don't want to teach. I want to sit and
Yeah,
do something else. It's always the case. The times when I would tell them they would ask me what should it be. I'm like, do whatever you want, like no rules. It would take them so much time to come up with something because you're giving them a complete like empty field. Yeah, do whatever you want. So,
yeah,
and for me that doesn't help. Limitations help. When I know that, okay, I have to write a pitch document that should not be more than 2 pages. It
Mhm.
helps me because I want to try to fit everything into these 2 pages. This is something that I took away, and it was one of the things that stuck a lot from LA, is that people don't like to read, especially
Mhm.
producers, reading a bunch of things all the time. So as brief as you can be, but at the same time, like having something meaningful, the better.
Yeah, yeah.
So like before, I used to write sometimes story arcs that would be like 5 pages minimum or something like that, just like talking. It doesn't, in the end, you're just like, yeah, no one's reading it, and you're fumbling, you're stumbling all over things. You're just trying to put everything out there, thinking that the more you put, the more you're gonna attract the person. Well, it's the exact opposite. So
Yeah.
I think based on that, I kind of tend to follow this approach in everything in life,
Mhm.
but also in this, like, know what your limitations are, set your own limitations, and
Yeah.
then uh, it just helps. I don't know how to explain it,
Yeah,
honestly.
no, man, I
For
get it.
example, yeah, and sorry, it was for example, I once read something by Dan Harmon, which also makes a lot of sense. Dan Harmon is the creator of Rick and Morty,
Mhm.
brilliant writer, obviously, but he says something like, the first step when you want to write, don't put any limitations, which I kind of agree with. Your mind is a universe, so
Mhm.
explore everything that's going to be in that universe. And he's like, do that, because once someone reads it, the limitations are automatically going to be enforced,
All
you
right.
know once it goes out of your mind. Exactly. I mean, it's good advice for someone like Dan Harmon, but again, you need to have the guts to do something like this also as a first time writer. Give yourself some kind of limitations, just helps you avoid this, this feeling of, because what you're telling me right now about your experience and when you got stuck, it's basically you got stuck because you found at some point that there was something that was more interesting than when you initially
Mhm.
came up with. And
Mm.
because you're the only one dealing with the story, you're going to go for what you find more interesting.
Yeah.
But that means, halas, you dropped something so then you get lost. Okay,
Yeah.
so what
Yeah.
am I doing? But this was good, but this is good, and then confusion, and you know where that goes all the time. So yeah, for me it's important to keep these things.
Yeah. And, on this note, when we're again talking about writers and their own specific processes and, what works for one writer doesn't work for another, this is where the
Yeah,
concept of writers' rooms is more, more, it's crazy because, I've personally
definitely.
only ever written anything with one other writer at max. I've never been
Okay.
part of a writing room, for example. And
Okay.
you've been part of a few writing rooms, so
Yes.
obviously you'll know better. My what I always think is, how a writer room's chosen one, because
Mm,
compatibility, I guess, is much more important than I mean, once you're a competent writer, you're a competent writer. There's no two
Yes.
ways about it.
Yeah.
So once competence is taken out of the equation, how important is compatibility, how important is not being stuck to your own idea, yeah, and the dynamics as
Yes.
well, of
Yes.
course, because some
Definitely.
people are like, okay, this is my idea, I'm not moving an inch away from this,
That
so
beats the point
so
of a writer's room if you're
exactly,
if you're like
exactly.
that.
So
Yeah.
writer's room is all about collaboration, and of course there's also hierarchy where maybe there's a
Yeah.
showrunner or a head writer,
Yeah.
whoever. So how does this dynamic how is this dynamic organized, and then how does it function once it's organized?
So yeah, this is an amazing question. No, really, because it's making me also think about these things. So the writers' room, there's no one way in doing it. Of course, you can have a writers' room as big and as small as you want. I feel that the basic number for a writer's room is three,
Okay.
not two, because when it's two writers in a room, it's very tricky. And I say this from experience. It's like I throw an idea,
Mm.
you don't like it, it's
Yeah.
dead. You throw an idea, I don't like it,
Yeah.
it's dead. Okay, I throw an idea, you like it, you add on it, you throw it back to me, I add a bit more, it changes, we're not sure if it's the same, it's dead, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the bounce between two becomes very difficult because it's like two forces try, unless these two are partners in writing and they really know how to work together, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
most of the times, like in my experience, I've always written with, it's not that people I don't know, I always know these people, but it's the first time we're working together, so it's first time in the writer relationship kind of thing, and it
Yeah.
proves difficult.
Hmm.
So when it's three, you always have someone who can be the, okay, I throw an idea, he doesn't like it, but this guy likes it,
So
okay,
two
let's
wins
give it a
over
chance.
one. Yeah.
Exactly. So you have, yeah, you can have more of a mediation, kind of someone who mediates the thing,
Hmm.
well, definitely, the more people, the better, in my opinion, because then when you have more than three, you're always testing. Yani, every idea is constantly being tested by several people at the same time. So if
Hmm.
someone likes it, another person likes it, but then a fourth person would say, okay, but there's a problem with it because one, two, three,
Hmm.
okay, that's a good point. So the more people, the more minds you have, essentially, the more you make sure that any idea that comes out is quite solid.
Yeah.
Well, this was for me the experience back in when I was in Dubai for this show, because we were, so it was me, and so I was like a co-writer, and there's the head writer, the creator of the show,
Hmm.
and then there were two assistants who were
Hmm.
basically there to take notes, but they helped, like, yani they took part in the discussions and stuff.
Yeah.
And there was our development producer, who was the person who came in with the questions all the time, just to make sure, to shake the idea and make sure that it stands. So it
Hmm.
was a brilliant dynamic, because I'll tell you the cons right now. It was a good dynamic because the ideas were always flowing. There was always thing coming out. Even when we take breaks and start talking about things that are irrelevant, they always seem to fold back into what we're doing and stuff. The bad thing about this is that you need to be organized. Otherwise, the ideas can go out of hand, and you're like, they stop becoming consistent. And maybe many, like, people keep adding on a certain idea, and then we forget what the initial idea was. And then we all like it, but we're not sure if we're saying the same thing. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
So that becomes tricky. So, in this sense, I think it's always important that there's a head in the
Hmm.
room, even if it's not the head writer, as in the creator of the show, but if
Hmm.
it's someone at least who's just there to keep things in order, it's very important, because you kind of, you keep it in check, because really put five people and make them talk about an idea, it can go
Anywhere. Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
really, it can go anywhere. So you always need someone who kind of pulls back, and okay, let's take a pause, let's repeat it, make sure everyone, we like it, okay, we agree on it, we write it on the board, now it's
Hmm.
set somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's the role that I find myself playing when I feel that there's a lack for something like this in the writer's room, because really, just to keep everything together and make sure we're all agreeing on the same things. Because sometimes, because, and as you also said before, compatibility is always important in these
Yeah.
things. And and it's always a very difficult thing to say an idea.
Hmm.
So if you're not sure about the people you're working with, or You might feel shy. You might not say what's in your head. I mean, that's happened to me a million times because I'm not someone who says everything that's in my head, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I'd find myself in writers' rooms when I'm just silent, listening.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'd be like, I remember this used to happen when I first started. So the head writer would always be like, am I paying you to sit here and listen? And say something, you know? So, which is a fair point, you know, you need to be taking part in it. But,
Yeah.
so that's so what I was saying, so there's this shame of saying your idea, and also sometimes like someone says an idea and it's horrible, there's also the shame of telling this person, oh no, this idea is shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and no, throw it away.
Yeah.
So that's why the dynamic is very important. It takes time, so the first day might be a bit like then it gets better and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's, as you said, it's team building and cooperation. You know, you need to walk into the room at some point, like, putting your ego aside. This is like for any art practitioner, not only
Yeah.
writers.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Massively
please,
important. Yeah.
please, just throw it away. Don't bring it into the room, and then try to collaborate as much as you can. You know,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, which is, yeah, it's a tough thing. Yani. It's also with the ego thing. I talk about it a lot because sometimes there are many people who don't like to say that someone else's idea is good and maybe better than theirs, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and this is chaotic in a writer's room. Like if you go in with that mindset and you want to be the best, you want
Yeah.
to be Donald Trump in the writer's room, it's not going to work. There's one aspect of Donald Trump that works in the writing's room is when you say everything is great, it's
Yeah.
amazing, it's fantastic. No, I'm joking, that doesn't work also. So you need to, you just need to go, you need to be open, collaborative, and just go with the flow, but it's super fun when it works.
I mean, this is not an idea, something that I'm working on or whatever, but it's one of those funny thoughts that you get, and you start thinking more about it. So I was
Okay.
kind of envisioning a TV series based on a writer's room, and
Okay.
so there's basically
Okay.
four writers, and there's a head writer, and
Yeah.
basically they're writing whatever. The head writer is someone who's very straightforward, kind of like Manuel, our dean from
Yeah.
our university.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, if he finds something is shit, he straight up says, shut the fuck up, this is shit. Like, that's it. And then the
Yeah.
four other people, they're all extremely emotional. The writers room that this head writer has assembled, everyone
Yeah.
has their own uniquely emotional sense, where someone's very, if you call his or her idea shit, they're completely offended by
Big.
it. The
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
doesn't even care. Even if you say that he's emotional, but he doesn't care, and he still starts going. But no matter what he's trying to do, he's always called shit. So you kind of have
Yeah.
these kind of funny
Okay.
characters within this, and all of that. So it could, I mean, as an
Well, that's
artist, like you
amazing.
said, no matter how much you kind of, for some people it's definitely easy to put your ego aside, absolutely, at least
Mm,
when they know what they're in it for, and all of that.
mm,
But I think ego is not the right word, because there is this one need for acceptance. Like, if I'm part of writers room, like there are four
mm.
people and four of us are part of a writers room, there is some sort of personal compulsion that I need to contribute as
Of
much as
course.
everyone else, if not more.
Yeah.
So, and then
Definitely.
the kind of my ideas need validation, or not
Yeah.
validation in
Yeah.
some sort of a superficial way, but if you're working on something, you want to be a contributor. and
Oh, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Definitely.
more often than not, when anyone from, even if someone's not related to the arts or whatever, if someone says your idea is not good, or if you get some sort of a critique of
Mm,
your idea or your story, it kind of gets difficult to deal with. So this
definitely.
kind of and then there's the whole matter of your own personal life, how your personal life is, and you
How
kind
that
of
day
tend
is
to,
going
exactly,
specifically. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, so you kind of tend to bring all of this shit into the writer's
Oh
room,
yeah.
and
Definitely.
it's a crazy, it's madness, I'm sure, inside writers rooms, where
Yeah.
maybe with a couple of volatile people, maybe things are flying, people
Oh
are
yeah.
throwing stuff at each other, throwing papers
Definitely.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a really cool. Yeah, I've been for a long time wanting to do something about the writer's room. Yeah, something similar to what you explained right now,
Yeah.
with this thing of having someone who gets super offended by everything. I think that's brilliant to have a character like that in a
Yeah.
writer's room who's always like just being sad because everything is shit.
Yeah.
It's like it's brilliant. I haven't had this experience yet. Like so far, all the rooms that I've been in were kind of smooth. They're not a lot. Like I talk as if I've been in like a million rooms. It's not that much, but there's always been this kind of interesting flow because there've always been rooms where where the people are being selected like specifically, knowing that okay, these three could work together and yield something interesting and stuff. So, but yeah, definitely a whole lot of drama. I wish we start establishing more writers' rooms.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that I think, especially here in the Arab world. Like, here's the story. Once I was called in to work on the series, that was like maybe 4 years ago. And I always used to work with a specific writer who taught me about the writer's room. He's one of the first people who established something like this in Lebanon, okay, who started working in a writer's room kind of thing, which means telling the producers, like, I'm not going to write it on my own. I need people to help me, which is a good step. So the same producers called me in for another project, but with a different head writer, okay? A Syrian head writer who's who's like big in Syria. He's written a lot of Syrian dramas and stuff. Well, Syria is known for their dramatic series. They're really good.
All right.
So, and the guy is brilliant. He has amazing ideas and stuff. But after 3 days of sitting in a room, he was like, I can't do this. He just told the producer, leave me alone. I'll write it and I'll give you a series. He just can't. He couldn't, it fucked him up because he's not used to working. And he used to explain to us, like, he was always like baffled in the room, like, and we give ideas and he's like, oh, this is nice. Oh, wow. What do I do? He'd get confused. And one day I remember he told us how he writes, like what kind of big schedule he creates for himself and how he plots the episodes. And he has a system and it works. It's functional.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. He was like, fuck this shit. No writer's room. Thank you. He left. And then he came back in a month with a series ready, and the series was good.
Yeah.
But, the writer's room, what it mainly does is it facilitates writing in terms of time, because when you have more than one mind, it's just more efficient.
Yeah.
And I think it just adds richness to the story, it's an amazing thing when you feel like, something has come out like a whole story and universe and stuff, and that there's a lot of people who helped build this, not just one person. It's more of a cooperative type of
absolutely
communal kind of work, which is nice. And you see that a lot in the States. They're really pioneers of that. I mean, all the writers that came to LA, like showrunners who have done like significant things, you look at them and they're like the average, your average Joe, like someone very he's not an artist. There's nothing very just a very normal person who has an idea and knows how to work with people, which is kind of cool. Nice. So yeah.
I mean, in general, I think working with people is one of the most important skill that you need to have if you want to work in film. Not just in writing, but in production as well, and on set, especially, maybe even in post production. This whole and that's the thing, man. Like, in filmmaking, this is one thing that keeps getting to me all the fucking time, and in each step of the process, it's that there's so much back and forth of criticism, or or even constructive criticism, making decisions all the time. Like, when you're prepping, you need to make decisions. It's all about decision making, basically. Filmmaking is about, you have an infinite possibilities kind of situation, and you kind of start narrowing it down into, you start controlling what are the boundaries for this kind of thing. And I think that's what people, the word vision is kind of loosely thrown in that sense. But I think the vision has more to do with this, right? Like, no one kind of, I mean, maybe if you're talking about Hollywood at its highest level, maybe things are different. But, in every other state of, where audio visual media is being produced, there's certain limitations. There's always, okay, I need to do it within this framework, either of budget, either of manpower, either of anything. So it's kind of, there's so much back and forth between people, that one of the most important things is working with people and, being nice, not in a yes man kind of way, but, being gracious enough to take criticism and offer, and also being kind enough to offer constructive criticism.
No, definitely. It's essential. It's a teamwork. So you can't do it if you just see things one way. This also, it depends, yani. even in the writer's room, like now I'm going a bit, it's never the case when there's just like, let's say 10 writers and there's no head among these 10.
Mm-hmm.
There always needs to be someone who just keeps it focused, because you see in every show there's a creator, either one person or two people,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So of course collaboration is important and stuff. It's definitely a skill. Hala, we both learned this firsthand during the masters,
Yeah.
the difficulties of collaboration.
Yeah.
But in the end, of course, it's something that should be done, but there always needs to be something, as you said, a limitation that
Mm-hmm.
comes from somewhere, and how to structure the thing, how to keep it. It's just for me, I think I'm tripping too much about this idea lately, because it has to do a lot with freedom,
Mm-hmm.
with the idea of freedom, or how freedom is really put on a very high pedestal, and we want to be free, and there's no such thing.
Yeah.
No one's free, even if they think they are, and they
Yeah.
live in the
Yeah.
free world and whatever. So let's just stay down to earth. Let's put our own limitations, and it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
Anna, for me, it just feels more comfortable to do that, to know that there is something that we can do and we can't do at this specific moment.
Mm-hmm.
It might change. It doesn't have to be set in stone forever, but it just keeps you on track. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's very likely to happen in a writer's room, really. There were days, in these past 2 weeks, where we'd start talking about something and we get into another topic, and then like 3 hours have passed and we haven't done anything, you know? So there needs to be someone to tell us, okay, guys, no, we're not here just to chat,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to, we need to finish something, and we need to, a day needs to end with something being accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. Something
It can't be
tangible.
that laid back. Exactly. At least half an episode. I'm not saying it has to be anything, a specific thing, but yeah, things can get carried away when you're too easygoing. That's the thing.
I mean, again, coming back to the idea of TV shows and all of this, man. There's Hollywood are the pioneers. Everything that happens in film or in TV shows and everything. Hollywood is kind of the pioneers.
Mm.
Europe has their own way of doing things. They
Yeah.
like to think of themselves as being more artistic than Hollywood. Also,
Yeah.
sometimes justified, sometimes completely unjustified. But so how is it in the Middle East, and what kind of stuff is happening right now? Because earlier when you were speaking, you were saying that nowadays this is happening, and how is the
Yeah.
landscape changing there in the Middle East?
How exactly? I don't know. I'm going to talk about what I feel is going on, because
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely a bigger interest right now in creating different types of dramas and fictions in
Mm-hmm.
TV. So in the Arab world, it was kind of like where it is everywhere. We have a lot of soap operas. In the Arab world specifically, they were most of the time centered around the main hubs of TV in the Arab world are Egypt, of course, number one. And after that, there was kind of Syria. They were kind of big on TV and stuff. But since the events of Syria, like the revolution and afterwards the war, drama has fallen down. So we've seen more of like collaboration kind of series coming out and stuff. But these are always usually within the hands of a select few who always work within these things. Now, what I feel is happening is that they're understanding, at least the people on top, whoever they are, the people with money, and are understanding that the more, like, I think money should be shifted more into quality type television to kind of mimic what's going on in Hollywood. Like, so when we say quality TV, it's like the post network era TV. So Breaking Bad, going back to our conversation, was kind of the tilting point. And after Breaking Bad, series started to look different. They're more big on art.
Yeah, yeah. High
They have a
production
more
value.
compelling story. Yeah, high production value. It kind of became the thing, the main thing. So I think in the Arab world, this is what they're feeling should be done, because there's just so many stories to explore, like endless. It's like an endless world of stories. If you just keep in mind the big tradition and culture that we have, there's a lot of things. And I think people are starting to realize that the more we shift our attention into these things, the better we can, I don't know, change stuff in our
Mm-hmm.
miserable situation. At least that's how I see it's going so far. So I think this is what's happening, and it's my impression that there more people are becoming, or the big producers are becoming more prone to explore stories, themes, characters that they wouldn't have done previously. Because before the market was very set, and there was no internet. So social dramas, action, historical pieces, but all mainly related around social issues and stuff were the main thing. It's
Yeah.
very hard to find a purely political drama that is critical of certain regimes and critical
Exactly.
of a certain, it's very rare to find, because it's
Exactly.
dangerous, of course. But
Exactly.
since the internet, I think, and the later years of the internet, things have become more and more accessible. So right now the number one country of internet drama consumption is Saudi Arabia in the
Oh,
world.
all right.
Okay. And Saudi Arabia is a state where not everything goes, as you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
very strict in terms of, morally and culturally and all of these things. So, but the internet is the freest place. So people are producing and are consuming a lot on
Yeah.
YouTube and stuff. So I think that's what made people feel that there's some kind of shift. Also, I would say that there was a failure for a big player like Netflix to
Mm-hmm.
kind of get into the Arab media market when it had the chance.
All
So we
right.
see Netflix are producing a lot of things in Turkey. Netflix
Mm-hmm.
produce in India a lot, I know
Mm-hmm.
also.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they believe is the Middle East. They feel like they've covered this region from these two
All
hubs
right. All
in the
right.
Middle East.
Which is
You know,
stupid, but okay.
yeah, but there was, something went wrong or something didn't happen. I know right now that there are more Netflix originals coming out, but they're still, they still conform to the way people who consume series here, they still conform to the same kind of subjects and themes. Netflix had one experience, which was a series called Jinn that
Mm-hmm.
they did back in 2017 or 16, I think, which was a complete failure on all
Okay.
ends. Like it
All
was a
right.
terrible show,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a lot of backlash because there was a kiss. Like the main character kissed someone in the first episode.
All
So
right.
apparently she got a lot of shit for that, and they kind of like pushed their brakes and were like, "Fuck this, and we're not doing it." So I think because of this gap, and because the Middle East, especially the Gulf regions, are not short of money, uh, many producers and media companies there felt like maybe they can fill in the gap by creating their own original content without having Netflix to come in and do that for them. This is all speculation. I'm not saying, but it's
Yeah.
based
Yeah.
on talks with people. It's based on many trials of trying to reach out to these big players and stuff and failing at that. So it's still a very, very ripe landscape,
Mm-hmm.
fertile. It's still very fertile, and there's a lot of, and you have a lot of people who have been raised watching series, watching fictions, and have studied how to do this, and they're just there waiting for an opportunity to start doing what they know best.
Yeah.
So I think this is what's happening right now, which is hopeful. It's
Mm-hmm.
very hopeful, because you feel like, okay, we'll start getting good content, hopefully. That's
Mm-hmm.
one. And two, we'll start being able to do something with all that we've learned and we consumed. So,
I mean, from what you say, at least it sounds a bit like what happened in India as well with Netflix, especially
mm,
Netflix when it entered and they started producing Indian content. Some of the content they came up with was outright atrocious, man. It was bad.
yeah,
Like it was
yeah,
so bad that people were like, okay, like who's sanctioning these deals, or who the fuck is in
yeah,
charge of doing all of this? But then I kind of start to think, and it's not just with films or TV shows and all of this. It kind of works on a bigger level for any sort of market. Is that
yeah.
Netflix and Amazon, for example? Amazon also the delivery company Amazon,
Mm,
not
mm,
just
mm,
the
mm.
Amazon Prime. They've made inroads in the American market. It's a kind of a world that exists in America, where things are done in a way, whole capitalism and everything. It's easy to make
Yeah,
inroads, or they've spent 20 odd years to kind of make inroads. They've established themselves, they've become pioneers of what they're doing. And
yeah,
obviously, their next goal would be to kind of reach out to other markets, namely
yeah,
ones with more population than ones without, obviously. So now
yeah.
this brings us to, China, India, the Middle East, and Africa also. So
Mm,
when they try to come and broach into non-Western markets, where I mean, on all levels, the non-Western world is completely different. The East is the East.
Definitely.
Things don't work how
Definitely.
they work in the West. And
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
know
for sure.
like, for example, in India, the kind of corporations we have are all familial based, and they're not
Mm.
true capitalists in that sense. Of course, now there's
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah,
wave
yeah.
of startups and all of this, but the
Of course.
traditional big Indian companies, these are not in an American sense, the capitalists.
Definitely.
This is a
Yeah, yeah,
complete
yeah.
different way of doing business and running things. So what happened is, at least in my region in India, uh, these platforms like Netflix just popped up, a few of them.
Mm.
And if Netflix is making one show, these guys are making six, and on a
Okay.
different level. The budget is much lower, whatever. These guys don't give a shit about quality anyways. So
Yeah.
they're just
Yeah,
churning
yeah,
out
yeah.
shows,
They just
like every week there's a new show coming out. Obviously zero quality, whatever, but things are. And of course, when there's shows, people are there to consume, because people unfortunately have all the time in the world right now. Most of them are staying home. Also in India,
yeah.
another big part that I realized, where people consume Netflix or these TV shows, is that when they're commuting, most people
Yes.
spend at least an hour or two in commuting, approximately, when they're in
Yeah.
big cities in India. So
Yeah.
once I was stuck in a traffic jam, when I was back in India in December, and I saw inside cars around me, inside these tuk-tuk autos around me, literally
Yeah.
everyone's has
They're
earbuds or
watching.
earphones, and they're watching something or the other thing, and it's fiction.
Oh
That's
wow.
very clear. Just you glance at it,
Okay.
and so infinite binging is happening of whatever kind of quality. And
Definitely. Doesn't
yeah,
matter what it is.
exactly. So I mean, in a way, the good thing is more content is being produced, okay.
Mm.
But
It's too much
that's not
content,
the
I
ends.
think.
Exactly, too much
Yeah.
content and not enough
Yeah.
quality at all.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, definitely.
one doesn't want the market to be saturated with outright shit.
Mm. No, it's so true. This is what's making me, يعني, every time I open the Netflix homepage, it's just a terrible burden to decide what to watch because there's so many things. You know that most likely there's a big chance that you pick something and it's not going to be that good or it's going to not engage you that much. Yeah, it's just an overload of stuff. That's the problem.
Yeah.
As you said, they're looking for just keeping things going and not really thinking of what things are,
Hmm.
you know. I think this is why right now there's a new trend that's coming out, which I kind of like, which is the limited series kind
Yeah.
of thing, which is like, okay, the story ends after 5 episodes or
Yeah,
six
and that's
episodes
it.
or
Yeah.
something, which is really good because I think this is a way of kind of trying to keep the quality, instead of having these shows that keep opening up again every season and like endlessly, you never know when they're going to end. So that might be a good thing that's
Yeah.
happening right now. But hey, it's oversaturated.
Yeah.
It's the age of information, so it's so easy to generate information that you're going to keep doing it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
keeping them there. I don't know, it affects quality, but that's why I think the lesser evident markets
Hmm.
are starting to make a rise right now because it's like, okay, uh, we have all the knowledge, expertise, techniques of how to make things, but these stories haven't been tackled,
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah. And there's something I'm always curious about, 1001 Nights,
Yeah. Yeah.
the famous story of
Yeah. Yeah.
Shahrazad and stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, this is the birth of series. It's like a woman telling a story, and there's a cliffhanger every night because she doesn't want her husband to kill her. Uh, it's never been done on a proper scale TV show yet,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I find very weird. There's been many attempts, definitely, in the Arab world and in the East generally,
Yeah.
but never. So maybe the time, yeah, it's kind of weird, no, when you think about like with so many things already there online that this one thing hasn't,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
hasn't been
Exactly.
made properly. So I don't know. Hopefully now is the time. Well, as you said, we're in our houses most of the time, so no better time to than to create more stuff
Yeah.
for us
Yeah.
to watch. Yeah.
Also, another thing with this, saturation of content is the fact that, okay, there are these benchmarks of what a good series is, Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones.
Mm.
Everyone has their own favorite, but there are certain number of benchmarks which everyone
Yeah.
kind of points to at some point. and everything else is kind of sticking to the same formula of these
Yeah.
episodes, or episodic series.
Trying to be
It's
them.
just like
Yeah.
film, man. I mean, at some point films also kind of, it all became about, this act 1, act 2, act 3, yeah, and midpoint this
Mm.
needs to happen.
Mm.
And there's no free flow of so at some point it kind of became to me that wherever I saw any film with little resemblance to this kind of things, I actually started to, so unconsciously liking it more, because I'm like,
Yeah, it
okay,
becomes interesting.
yeah, it's not predictable. Now the shows are
Definitely.
predictable, the films are predictable. you know every
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone else recently, and we are talking about whose works do you like and all of that. So
Okay.
when we are on the topic of whose works do I look forward to watching, my answer still came from the space of people who made their name in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's very little newer people whose work I'm actively looking forward to,
True.
in who started kind of in the last decade or so. There's
Definitely.
not many people who are doing, like, amazing work, whatever, which
Yeah,
it's
so
not
true.
consistent. Yeah.
It's as if there was an age where the things kind of came out, and now we're just seeing the repetition of these things,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Yeah. I know. I guess in cinema, this is why in cinema, like you have the offshoot of the art house, like that have no rules at all.
Yeah.
These type of films that keep trying to offer something fresh, but even in those, sometimes you're just amazed at how repetitive they
Yeah.
become.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing. It's like the
Exactly.
complete same thing. But I don't know. I have a hope, at least, or a faith that even within storytelling itself, there's still so much to explore in terms of how you tell a story. So because you were talking about this like 3-act structure thing, all of these rules or
Hmm.
formats or formulas that we use as writers to learn how to write,
Hmm.
it's so easy and so important to break them. But at the same time, I'm not gonna say easy, but it's like it's always tempting to break them, and try to tell a story in a way that does not conform to these, but at the same time can be engaging and fun and bingeable or whatever you want.
Hmm.
And I think now is the time to start playing around with these things. Well, there are some series who have started to do that. I mean, for me, HBO, they're always reliable in that sense because they always really make it a point to make things that are different, keep pushing
Yeah.
the boundaries, keep trying something new. They do that always in terms of content. Their shows are darker, they have more sex, they have more blood, they have all of
Yeah.
these things.
Yeah.
But even in terms of storytelling, like for example, one of the first limited series that came out was Chernobyl,
Hmm.
5 episodes.
Yeah.
And even structurally, they don't really follow the thing,
Hmm.
the way it should be done. Like the series does not start with your protagonist. You only start meeting the protagonist I think until the end of the first episode or something
Hmm.
like that, which is something that's very cool. Like even, I always find myself having discussions about this. Even the hero's journey, you know,
Hmm.
the one way that most stories are told, which has been reduced now to a very fun, also writing trick called the story circle
Yeah. Yeah.
that Dan Harmon developed. I mean, it's perfect. It's really nice. It's really good as a tool for you to structure, but that can be broken. You don't have to keep following the circle. Sometimes, like, I go back to 1001 Nights because
Hmm.
that type of storytelling, there's a type of storytelling that I really feel is interesting to explore, which is one where the story kind of keeps branching out into
Hmm.
different sub stories, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you start following a different thing, and then maybe you go back to the origin. No, there's just so many ways that you can deal with stories and structure.
Hmm.
That's why when I said before, like, structure for me guides the thing, because even within the structure you can create any kind of structure you want, but as long
Yeah.
as it holds and you remain faithful to it, you can create any kind of drama you want you
Absolutely.
know
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Again, back to Vince Gilligan, I don't know if you've seen the film that he made, the offshoot of Breaking Bad,
Yeah. Yeah. I did, man.
El Camino.
Yeah.
So El Camino, and for me it was brilliant. It was like, from, yeah, I like these type of stories where, like, you start it, this is a story about a guy trying to escape.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And but it takes you on a journey through the escape, you know. A lot of things happen, a lot of
Yeah.
unexpected things. I remember also the Uncut Gems.
Oh, that
Have
was
you seen?
brilliant, man. Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
Man, it's like, you know, you can see the structure. It's like, let's stay on edge for an hour and a half. You know, let's see someone making all the wrong decisions and trying to save his ass and failing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a structure, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't have to be in one way or another. It is a hero's journey. Anything can go into that circle,
Yeah.
but the structure itself is like, it's very fresh. You feel that there's something that keeps you on edge, it keeps you engaged, and the way the film was done is also really brilliant, I think.
Yeah.
Adam Sandler,
Yeah.
Saddam
Yeah.
Andler, was really good in that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I just feel, there's many also ways to explore how we deal with narrative. Well, now is the time, because people are willing to put money into things if they think they can be
Yeah.
different.
But I mean, like, I completely agree with the Uncut Gems as an example. But regarding El Camino, man,
Mm,
when I watched it, it was good to have this closure of what happens to the kid's
Jesse.
character, yeah, Jesse,
Yeah.
and but then after thinking about it, after watching it, I was like, this movie in itself makes no fucking sense. Like,
Oh yeah, completely.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
no one would give you a fucking penny if you wrote that script and went to anyone.
Nope.
Like,
Nope.
it was such a like a random kind of film. Like, I don't know, man. I mean, it was fun watch, because I was
Yeah,
watched
yeah, yeah.
Breaking Bad and all of that.
Yeah.
But at some point, I was like, okay, why did they make this film? I mean, like,
Because they can.
yeah, exactly. Once you've kind
That's the
of done
only
Breaking
reason.
Bad, I guess, yeah, yeah.
No,
So,
definitely, I agree with you. And for me, it didn't even matter. I forgot how it ended. I didn't really care about knowing what Jesse's story, how it's gonna end,
yeah,
because I'm just using it because it's like that. And for me, it was just like, let's see what he can do since he can, and
yeah,
there's
yeah.
no, yeah. And for me, he just wrote a very fun film that you enjoy watching, and then you forget about it. I'm not talking more than that, because I'm talking just structurally. It's a very nice way to. That's why I'm telling you, for me, sometimes this helps a lot when I know, okay, it's a film about someone trying to escape.
Hmm.
And let's fill in the details and let's make these details as interesting as possible and put as many ideas as you want. So you have the structure,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then you start filling in the blanks.
yeah,
Which is a fun way of writing, I would say.
yeah.
For me, it works most of the time.
That's it for today's episode of the Filmanthropist.
Conversations like these, I think, are very, even if we don't reach anything in the end, like a kind of conclusion, it's good to
Hmm.
keep having these conversations, especially related to film and stuff like that. So thank you.
Yeah, let's see. I guess, the podcast will find its audience, or, what we are talking about definitely kind of resonates with people, because at the end of the day, we are all
Definitely.
just like them.
Yeah, exactly. We're all fumbling and
Yeah,
trying.
yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah.